Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we continue our summer film retrospective with the 1978 Piranha, directed by Joe Dante. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the upcoming Young Captain Nemo series from Fievel and Friends Macmillan Books. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth Studios, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, editor-in-chief of HorrorMovies.net, writer for Rockabilly Online, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
One that's special.
It is special. And it is Texas. Boy, we've got a Texas movie for you guys this week. Both of you in Texas, and we have a movie that is shot like in your own backyard. Finally,
Yeah.
also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Joya Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello, Joya.
Hello, Julia.
Hello, hello. Drew, I interrupted you. What's up?
I got nothing, but can't wait.
Okay. Yeah. I think we were thinking about. So I grew up in Central Texas. This movie was shot in Central Texas. You guys are in Central Texas. This movie feels like old home week. Okay. Piranha is a 1978 American. This is what Wikipedia says. Satirical B horror film. So called, directed by Joe Dante, starring Bradford Dillman, Heather Menzies, Kevin McCarthy, Keenan Wynn, Barbara Steele of the Enormous Eyes, and Dick Miller, who is a favorite who's been on many, many films that we've covered on this show. Produced by none other than Roger Corman. Piranha is heavily influenced by, and some would say, and I think we will discuss this, parodies the 1975 film Jaws. It was the first in a long line of B grade Jaws homages, ripoffs, whatever you want to call them, like Grizzly and Orca. And it started a whole set of Piranha movies. This is a franchise. There was a sequel, Piranha 2: The Spawning, which was a James Cameron picture in 1981. It's been remade a couple times. That blows my mind that there's a shot by shot remake of it from 95. Then there's that 3D one from 2010. It's got its own sequel from 2012. There's a lot of Piranha movies. It all starts here. So let's get our opening thoughts. I think we started last week with Tony. Joya, we haven't started with you in a while. So this time, let's go Joya, Tony, Drew, and then I'll go Joya. Opening thoughts. Piranha, 1978. Lay it on us. Oh, you're from Texas
I
too. So this is also your
yeah, well,
backyard.
yeah, I spent a very large chunk of my life in Central Texas as well. So I have to say though, okay, let me start with my actual opening thoughts. I saw this film at some point in my youth, and I don't remember anything about it except for the fact that I was completely traumatized by it. I thought it was terrifying. It has definitely been when you thought it was safe to go back in the water kind of movie for me, even though of course we don't have piranha anywhere in places that I have gone swimming. But I was always freaked out by it, and I just remembered it being terrifying. I didn't remember what it was. It is pretty scary. It's not quite as scary as I remembered it because I was probably a kid. I don't know if I was 18 or less, but anyway. It is pretty scary, but it's also has its funny moments. There's some stuff about it. I think there's a few dark things about it that I'll want to get into later, as far as that's the same kind of thing that we have in Jaws, which has to do with people sacrificing other humans and or the environment or the world for money. So I hope to get into that. But yeah, it was neat to see San Marcos in the film. I felt bad about the water being so, because there is some beautiful water. There's some beautiful water in Central Texas, some really pretty clear rivers and streams. But this is not one of those. It's pretty dark and mucky, so you can't see the fish. I was like, if this had been New Braunfels, they'd be able to see the things coming at them. Anyway, but so it was interesting to revisit it. I don't know if I can say I liked the film, but I think it's definitely worth watching if you're into creature features and that kind of thing. Yep.
Very cool. Tony, what are your thoughts about Piranha? First of all, did you watch this as a kid?
I no, my parents definitely would not have let me see this. I think eventually I caught part of it, and then I watched it for sure streaming on one of the Roku channels. I can't remember which one. Like last year, there were I think 1, 2, and or 3. But yeah, the older ones were on streaming at some point, and I watched them. But I did see Deadly Treasure of the Piranha, which was on TV, although it was really called Killer Fish. And
Golly.
I guess that wasn't cool enough. I don't know what happened, but there's a big event, Deadly Treasure of the Piranha. And then when you see it, even though I was a kid, they had basically replaced the Killer Fish logo with that black caption text of the time. And just kind of like basically the equivalent of putting duct tape over it and then scrawling Deadly Treasure of the Piranha. Like, they didn't even make a new title card. They just hoped that people wouldn't care. And that had Lee Majors, which was cool because Lee Majors was the fall guy, and among other
The $6 Million Man.
Rogers. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it was the fall guy though. Yeah.
Buck Rogers, so that was cool. But all of these movies, like this one's, it's cheesy and it's kind of fun. It's more brutal than I remember it actually. But man, piranhas and quicksand, I think, were the two things when you were a kid that, according to pop culture, you better watch out for. Like, if you're walking in the woods, you don't even know. There's just quicksand everywhere, and you better know how to get out of it. Somebody better throw you some vines. If you're swimming,
was it one of your friends, Tony, or somebody on Facebook recently said that they had been fallen into quicksand not once but twice, and I was like, oh, so you're the person who that happens to.
Wow. That's like the lightning getting struck more than once by lightning kind of thing. But that and piranha, like if you were swimming in the river, you just didn't know. Like, even though you knew there were probably snakes, and there might be in certain parts of the South, like alligators or whatever, or I guess Florida crocodiles, but like piranha, you don't even know what could happen. And it was like this scary thing when you're a kid. I mean, later you find out, like, oh, okay, well, they're not in
They're only in the Amazon.
Although
They're only wherever the hell. Yeah.
Although there's always the point where somebody goes, yeah, but my cousin's friend told me that they're selling them in aquariums, and some of them sometimes get released. Your friend's cousin's friend's uncle's sister, and by that token, piranha were to be feared, even in North America in the late 70s, early 80s. I don't know what's replaced piranha, if anything, but during that time period, the rivers, you don't even know.
Sharknado?
Yeah, I guess so, maybe.
No, but nobody believes in Sharknado. Whereas somehow the notion of a South American fish winding up in the Brazos River just seemed just possible enough.
That is for whatever
Still
reason.
sharks.
Right
It's still
around
sharks.
that
We have
time,
Shark Week. It's still sharks.
tarantulas taking over
that's
everything.
true.
That was the thing in the late.
Oh my God! If we're ever gonna do, if you want to do another movie that terrified me and traumatized me through my youth, it's Kingdom of the Frickin' Spiders. Man, that movie was so damn scary with the stupid tarantulas.
Just for you, Julia. Anyway, yeah. So I enjoyed revisiting this, but I'll pass the torch.
Outstanding. Drew, what are your thoughts on Piranha?
Well, I want to start by laying some trivia in that connects this DNA-wise to the previous set of movies, the Creature from the Black Lagoon series. The casting agent on this film is Jack Arnold, the director of the first two Creature from the Black Lagoon movies, daughter. So Joe Dante, upon learning that, used that to get in contact with Jack Arnold so he could get his wisdom on filming an underwater monster movie. So there is a direct tie between the Creature from the Black Lagoon and Piranha. So I wanted to make sure that got stated for the record, because I feel like, tying these things together, since we were trying to keep this on theme, is important to our listeners. I like this movie a lot. I can't remember the first time I saw it, probably when I was a teenager or maybe a little younger. I like Joe Dante's movies a lot. I actually just watched Inner Space last week, just for the heck of it. I think that I think Julia hit it. This is a creature feature. It is a scary movie. I think it's fun scary. I don't think this is like scary like torture porn kind of scary, because the concept is so ludicrous. I love seeing Wimberley and San Marcos and the Hill Country in a movie, because every time we see Texas in a movie, it's kind of misrepresented as being all this gigantic, flat, desert filled with oil derricks, and it's cool to see these sort of green hilly Texas with rivers that I live around represented in a movie. So I love that, and it's just a fun, breezy kind of, this is a good movie that I think I would like to watch on like a rainy day kind of monster movie. It's almost, even though it's scary and it is kind of brutal, it's almost kind of relaxing in a weird way. Like it's not a movie you have to think very hard on, because it's about mutated piranhas killing campers.
Yeah, I want to go right in, because I'll share what any thoughts I have, but I don't think I have anything much different from the wonderful way that you guys have laid it out. I want to go right into actually a question that I have, which is, how are we to take this film? Because I think it's too easy to call there. The Wikipedia just straight out calls this a parody of Jaws, and I don't think it's fair to call this a parody of Jaws. I don't even think it's quite fair to call this movie particularly campy, because it's not that campy. It might
Yeah,
have some
Roger
elements of
Corman calls it
humor.
an homage to Jaws, and I think that's the right word. And Steven Spielberg certainly saw it that way. He was
I
like,
think it
"The
could
movie is
be
awesome."
considered an homage to Jaws. It lifts a
Well, I
lot
mean,
of
they
its
have the
thematic.
Jaws video game from right
Yes.
up in front. I mean, they're not being
Yeah.
obtuse about the influence of Jaws.
Oh no, they wear their influences on their sleeve. They also make mention of the creature from Black Lagoon. I mean, it's clearly and some elements are broader and more humorous than others. But I mean, basically, this is a fairly straight horror movie. It just had, does have a few one-liners, but there's no. It's I, I'm trying to. What I'm comparing it to is a whole movement that's happened recently, and I've heard Tony complain about it a lot more than I have. Movies that are made strictly for Sci-Fi Channel, and they're intended to be completely ridiculous, and nobody's supposed to take them at all seriously. And your Sharknadoes and all that stuff. And this is not that. This is something that strains all credulity, but that makes you kind of excited. It's like telling a campfire tale, and the stories that you're telling, there's no way that they could be true, but the fact that you're telling them as though you kind of believe them makes them scarier. I completely am with you, by the way, about your notion that it's kind of relaxing to watch this movie. There's something about it that feels a lot like classic B films like The Blob or what have you.
Well,
I mean,
one
do you
of
Well,
the
guys
things.
think it's fair to
I
call this a
do.
parody?
It's not a parody, because that to me is something like. Well, honestly, it's almost more like the movie that Joe Dante almost made for Jaws 3, Jaws 3 People Zero. That would have been a
Right.
parody. This is. It's. I do think it's campy. I mean, Kevin McCarthy and Dick Miller, who is, by the way, the least. I love the guy, but he's the least convincing Texan of all time. But even with that get up on, but I do think it is a campy movie. Is it campy through and through? No, but it definitely has an element of camp to it, and don't just mean summer camp,
No.
but it's. I
And when we say campy, so let's drill into that just a little bit. Like for instance, Batman 1966, that film,
Oh
that's
yeah, it's
campy,
not campy as
but
that,
that's a
but it's
straight up
over the
comic.
top. It's over the top.
Right.
It's made with the intention of being tasteless. Like
Yes.
there is, I was watching the commentary on this, and Joe Dante said Roger Corman had very little notes except more blood, and
Yeah.
that to me, like you said, knowing that you were making a movie in maybe offensive taste, or at least in questionable taste. Again, to call that a parody is wrong, but I don't think you can say that it's straight face either.
Right.
No, well, I think one of the
No, I
differences
think that
is like, I think I told this before. I know a guy who worked on some of the sci-fi stuff, and he was doing
yeah.
effects and he was doing editing and a lot of After Effects. And he made some things that looked really good. In fact, they were so good that the notes they got from the people making the movie were, you can't make it look that good people want it to look cheesy. And I think that's one of the main differences. Like when you're doing that, like when you're purposely making it look crap because haha, this will get more Twitter like hits, more tweets about this, that's terrible. And I don't think these movies were that. They were campy in that, some of the way the music is applied and they're really like playing with it. But it's still, the horror parts are pretty straight up horror parts.
Yes.
Well, you were right that they were trying to make the most polished movie they possibly could for the time allotted and for the budget. Like they were trying to figure out ways to make the fish look as real as they possibly could. And
it's only a $600,000 movie, but the fish look really real. And I think part of it is, to me, what was so memorable is the sound effect, which is like a dental drill that they use the dental drill to make the sound effect. But it sounds terrifying. At first I thought it was bees, and I looked it up and they're like, oh, dental drill. But I just thought the sound effect was so effective. It was just really, really cool. And they're rubber fish on sticks, but they surely don't look like that. They look pretty scary.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big part of the camp is like I say, recapturing that notion, oddly enough, from camping, where you're telling an absurd story with a smile, but you're telling it just to get that frisson, so that you have characters here and go, it's an army program that was intended to unleash killer fish on the North Vietnamese. That's absurd. Having Kevin McCarthy, the star of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, say it in all seriousness while riding a raft down there is an element that is so silly that it's fun and delightful, but nobody's goofing it up, and that's great. I To the extent that we can call this camp, this is the kind of camp that I like. I mean, for sure. I enjoy this a lot. Uh, I'm also I have a feeling that the film is very much a part of its time. But let's start at the beginning and work our way through. We open up with a scene that I think could open any slasher movie, with two teenagers who wind up finding this fence to go onto an enclosed area to go skinny dipping in this pool that they find. And so far, this is very much what happened at the beginning of Jaws, except for the difference is we're in Central Texas. So it's a lot of trees, and I mean, man, all these live oaks, it's so strange. And all that limestone, everything looks exactly like the places I ran around in as a kid, just like outside of the
And
suburbs, just wandering. Yeah.
I
Go ahead.
I want to know why they're able to get into that facility so easily. If this is like these horrible killer fish, I mean, whenever they get released out into the river, Kevin McCarthy acts like these guys did
Oh,
something
wait until
bad
we get
wrong.
there
But
with
it's
how
like,
they get released.
no, but the same
Yeah.
thing is how these kids even get into this space if it's supposed to be like super high security. You know what I mean? It's such a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that
It's
annoyed me
beyond
to start.
absurd. It's completely absurd. This is supposedly a, this is right now all we know is this is a military installation that they've broken into. I'm not even sure it's clear to them that it's a military installation. It's just an enclosed area. So it could belong to anybody. It could belong to the state. It could belong to Texas Parks and Wildlife. We don't know. They're just breaking in and they find a fairly well lit, apparently pretty clean pool, and they jump into it, and they and they immediately get eaten by something that we don't see, which is an absurd kind of suspense given that we've all come into a movie called Piranha that has big razor-teethed fish on its poster. But whatever, they're pulled underneath by something and they're screaming. So next we meet our main characters of this. Now, this is really interesting to me. The main character is a girl named Maggie McCown. If I recall, that was how she said her name. Anyway, Maggie, and she is a bounty hunter. Like Dog, the
She's not
bounty
a bounty
hunter.
hunter. She's a
Only
skip tracer. Skip tracer is what they call it.
okay. Explain to
She's
me the
not because
difference
she's
between
not.
a skip
But
tracer.
to me, it's different because she's not looking for criminal or people who are accused of wrongdoing. She's looking just for people who are just missing. They're just not there. So I don't think
No, a
necessarily the
skip
same.
tracer
I
is
see it
looking
as
for
No.
people who
No.
A skip tracer is looking for people who ran out on their bail. I mean, she's supposed to find. Now she's been hired to just find some missing persons, but
okay. I thought it was
she's out
good.
to, yeah. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Fugitive. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not like Hallmark movie find the missing person. You find it's like, well, they're employed by like debt collectors and bail bondsmen.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah,
So
I mean, she happens to be looking for missing persons, but primarily it's somebody looking for nefarious. If somebody skipped out, a skip tracer. It's like they've skipped out on a
yeah,
thing they're supposed to be at, or
yeah. Whether it's paying a debt or paying their bond or whatever. So yes. Now I call her a bounty hunter. She's going to have to use some clever tricks because, she seems to be, unless she's a ninja, she's a fairly diminutive woman, and her trick seems to be that she's like Lois Lane. She just sort of marches in places and starts, forcing, convincing people to do stuff for her. She is looking for these missing kids, and she comes to the cabin of this old burnout uh, named Paul Brogan, and it is Paul, right? Yeah, Paul Grogan. She comes to his place and she's like, "Have you seen these missing kids?" And he's like, "No, lady, I'm an old burnout." Because we've met him before, and he is, the kind of guy who spends no money, lives in the middle of the woods. The only money he does spend is on a lot of booze that is brought to him by yet another old timer who lives in the woods. Um, the interesting thing to me about this character of Paul, which is played by the actor Bradford Dillman, we know he's in the woods. We know that he's actually he's well known as a drunk. They're going to play with this a lot. I think that we're given to understand that he is some kind of Vietnam vet. And the reason I say that is because he's drinking out of an army canteen. The canteen he has literally has an OD Green Army canteen cover around it, which I think is intended to be, a silent code that what we're seeing is a burned out Vietnam vet.
I
I
think
don't
there's some
know.
other things, and I
Um,
can't remember like right at this very moment. There's some other things, and a lot of that. There's a lot of stuff just in context. Being that this is '78,
yeah.
there's a lot of unspoken, like, oh yeah, of course that guy's a vet. Like I think
Yes.
most, a lot of people that age, the age this guy is at the time, and just kind of his demeanor and everything like that, are basically like, oh yeah, man, this guy's seen some stuff, and that's why
Yes.
the person that he is. And then he's also friends with the complete weirdo who is probably like a World War II vet, like old
Hmm.
guy. Who that guy is just, man, the way he
And
speaks,
that's
and
Keenan Wynn.
yeah, but he's
Yeah.
meets a terrible end. But all of his stuff that when he's talking to the girl is just wow. You fulfill that guy. He's like the Torgo of the
Yes.
hey, I'm gonna say some weird things. Okay, old timer. Yeah, he's weird. Kind of like
Yep.
all the shorthand that gets you around. Like, here's the colorful end of the spectrum of the cast.
Mhm.
And by the way, before we're taking a task, skip tracers. I mean, in general, it's meant to be somebody who's skipped town, but usually you hire those people to find. It's usually related to bail bondsman though. But
See, that's what I'm saying. Is to me, I think of her as being more like a detective, but in the novelization of this movie, she's referred to as Skip Tracer because she had had hired a Skip Tracer to find her boyfriend or something like that, and so that's what she got the idea. So that's the only reason I say she's even that. But I would have called her like a private detective more than anything else. But whatever.
She
Yeah.
actually says in the dialogue in the movie, she goes, "I work for a skip tracer agency." Out
Oh, there
of
you go.
wherever she says. Yeah, I mean, who knows? She may have her specialties. They may have her spend a lot of time looking for missing persons in such a way that it's going to be a job where she needs to like go get up close to people and ask them, "Hey, have you seen so and so? Have you seen so and so?" Um,
well,
but yeah, yeah,
she has no knowledge of environmental anything, nor
yeah.
top secret anything, because she's pretty quick to just mess around in a top secret army facility, including
Yeah.
That was
just like, I'm
hilarious.
gonna drain that. It'll be fine. What could possibly go wrong with just messing around with switches?
Yeah,
I know.
she
I
goes. She says to
love the fact that this is a movie, and this is one of the only movies I can really think of where the quote-unquote hero of this movie is actually directly responsible for every bad thing that happened.
Yeah.
Not the mad scientist,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I guess
Yeah.
he's responsible in that he made the mutated piranha to begin with, but at least he was keeping them locked up. He knew it was a messed up thing, so he was keeping them locked up. She, by poking around, starts every death that happens in this movie, and she never owns it. She never seems like she feels.
That's a really good point.
She never feels like she feels bad enough about it, and I kind of love that because
Yeah.
people, there are people who are that just so blindly up their own ass. Like
Yeah.
she's so quick to point the finger at everybody else in this movie, and she's never like. She's never like, man, if only I hadn't just blindly decided to drain this pool.
Well, not to sound like a broken record,
Okay,
but
well,
that's the narcissist.
that pool
Dun, dun,
that pool
dun.
thing, there's when they come across this swimming pool and inside of because she goes to Paul and she goes, where do you think these kids are? And he goes, well, there's an abandoned army facility up the hill. And she goes, oh, well, then you're going to drive me there, which he does, because burnout or not, he has nothing better to do. And he takes her up there. She breaks the lock to go in, and she finds this pool, and she decides that maybe the kids drowned. And the reason she does is because she finds their backpacks in the
Well, she found
lab.
the girl's
Now, in
and the
this
girl's necklace.
lab,
So first she finds the girl's necklace.
yeah. But in this lab, before she does the draining and stuff, let me just say there's a whole nother movie going along that we don't see, because there is a loose 7-inch dinosaur running around in this
I
lab
know.
that never gets
Well, no, it's like the logical whatever the piranha. It's like a tiny mutant that they've
Yes.
made, which I guess would maybe
Yeah.
where they decided to lead into the flying ones in the next movie. But
Yep.
yeah, there's the stop motion like piranha mutant that
Well, the idea
Awesome.
behind that creature, they talked about this
Yeah.
on the commentary, and I wish that they had more money to do this. But before, because while they were making this movie, they actually had to convince Roger Corman to continue making it. Because like halfway into it, he was like, "Oh well, this is too expensive. We're just going to cancel the whole thing, and we're going to." We're going to just use the footage you shot in something else, and which is a very Roger Corman thing to do.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
But Joe Dante got on the phone with him and convinced him to continue making the movie. But the idea behind this mutated piranha, the land piranha, was that it was going to be throughout the entire movie, and it was going to keep getting bigger, and the movie was going to end with this thing being
Godzilla.
like gigantic, and it was going to make its way out into the ocean, setting up piranha sequels. Yeah. And they didn't have the money, so it just ended up in this one scene. I kind of dig that though, because it just shows how batty this movie is. That they're just gonna be like, and here's a piranha, a land piranha, and we have a snake piranha in the aquarium, and we're gonna just show these to you, and we're never gonna do anything with that.
Yeah, we could get back to them in another movie maybe someday. But so that's going on. Anyway, she's convinced that these kids somehow met with foul play in this lab that is clearly not closed, because there's like warm coffee, there's so somebody's around here. She goes back out to the pool and she goes, well, darn it, I'm draining the pool to see if their bodies are at the bottom, is for them to float. So there's a good chance that there's dead kids down there at the bottom of this pool.
Yeah, I don't understand how that creature is loose and nobody, like, he doesn't have him locked up or the little dinosaur critter.
Right. Well, anyway, we don't see them again, but she drains the pool, and that point is exactly what you guys said in the whole movie, which is that she drains the pool and she therefore sends all of the razorfish out into the public waters.
But that shouldn't be possible. This is what I'm saying about how bad the security is in this place. Because if there are razorfish, then there shouldn't be a way to drain them into the public water system. It should be that if you drained the water, then the fish would all just die because they'd all be waterless, because they'd be stuck in whatever filtration system would keep them from getting drained out into the river. I mean, it's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. The fact, like I said, that those kids were able to get in there so easily. They didn't even have to break the lock like the girl did, like the skip tracer chick did. It's just all too simple. And I guess the explanation for that is that he's not really supposed to be there anymore. That he just, because what happened was, he explains later that they decided not to have the Piranha program, and so they poisoned them all. But these guys that survived were super mutants that just didn't die. So I don't guess they're really supposed to even be there.
I think that's more of the case. Like, I mean, it doesn't really matter because you're right on a bunch of points, but this is kind of the same thing with like Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
It wasn't supposed to happen this way. They weren't supposed to be around. Who knows the state of the facility? I wish I could see more of I should have freeze framed it more. In addition to all the weird mutants, there's all the stuff in like preserved versions of all the mutants, and nobody, like, it's funny, there's like, oh, that's weird, and they just pass by like all this just insane mad scientist stuff that's in this lab. Like, at no point are they like, wow, this man, some really messed up stuff was going on here. They're like, that's weird.
They don't mention it later either. They don't mention it to like the press or the army or whoever it is that shows up. They just forgot completely.
Well, the army may have tried to stifle that because they do some of that, but yeah. It's like, what's even worse though is they do this thing and then he jumps out and is like, no, don't do this, and they think he's a crazy attacker. So they beat the crap out of him.
But that was a stupid scene too. You think she would have been like, what are you talking about, and like not kept going, and instead trying to, like, basically she tries to kill him instead of just going, why should I stop? I mean, if somebody who works in a lab tells me, no, don't do what you're doing, I'm going to think maybe I should not do that. I'm not going to go, oh, I need to kill you now because you're like annoying. I don't know. That was weird.
Like in other words, if you're about to pull a lever or punch a big button or open a sealed door, and some guy in a lab coat comes running out and says, for the love of God, don't open that sealed door. You're right.
I'm not going to go, I need to whack this guy with whatever large, heavy object I can find.
No, that's when you say, I work for a skip tracer company, therefore I'm just going to press this button or switch this lever because I know better, right? That's
yeah.
Well, to be fair, now, they did have a line at the beginning from the guy who hired her who said, well, I know you don't usually you always work in urban stuff, so this is rural, so maybe that's why.
Also, it possibly involves a crazy mutant army facility and possibly never taking responsibility for killing dozens, if not hundreds of people. But
so I get that this is a thing about a low budget movie where the army the army lab is made up of one scientist, but it is very strange. It strains credulity to imagine that one scientist could have this entire lab to himself. Somehow the power is still running. He's got all of the lab is still going. He's still drawing his government paycheck. And supposedly this program got shut down. This would be like if the guys at, like, the various astronomical labs that were down in South America during the 60s, if somehow, some of Carl Sagan's friends over there had just kept working there and somehow somebody forgot to cut off their paychecks.
Because he's babysitting the mutants. Because it would be more like if Carl Sagan's if they had brought back some critters from, not just moon rocks, but somebody had brought home like creatures, and they're like, okay, well, we're not going to have this program anymore, but somebody needs to keep an eye on these creatures that we brought back. You can't just leave them unguarded.
Yeah. Okay.
Unfed.
Yeah. So I agree with all of you though that he seems, he has a cheap ass setup because it serves the plot and also because that's what they can afford to make. But what he needs is an enormous technological, like, what's the zombie control organization in the Mila Jovovich series? I'm blanking right now. Umbrella. Isn't it Umbrella Corp? Huh?
I don't know if the corporation Stars is the, like.
Yes. Okay. And they that's the kind of facility that you need. Multiple security apparatuses. All of
Or
these
they could have just
walls, all of
starved the
these.
mutant fish.
Yes, indeed. Sure.
Well, they're being
Yeah.
fed a steady diet of teenagers, swimming
What?
This
teenagers,
guy's a mad
and
scientist,
dogs.
though.
Yeah. But what
Yeah.
I'm saying is, if he'd starved the fish, then they would be dead. So the question of him drawing
Oh,
a
well,
government
that's
salary
what I'm
is,
saying.
if they want the fish dead, why are they paying this guy to keep them alive?
He knows too much.
Yeah, I guess.
I think we're looking far more than a lot of people who probably made this movie. But like I said,
Yeah.
he tried to starve them, but there's a steady diet of dogs and wandering teenagers. I guess my starving plan didn't work because now more teenagers fell in. This is my
Well, at
rotten
least he doesn't
life.
have to feed the piranha that day.
That's what I'm
It's
saying.
yeah, it's Kevin McCarthy, by the way. Again, I love this actor. He's really great. They now, he tries to steal their Jeep because he's real worried now. He knows, oh my God, that pool drains directly. Yeah, the grate that was pulled aside to drain the pool, that pool drains directly into the public waterways. So, that means all of my mutant, poison immune piranha are going to go into the river, so I need to like drive real fast and warn the authorities. And he immediately has a wreck. So it causes all kinds of problems for them. So now the three of them need to go down the river to warn the authorities on a, not making this up, on a Huckleberry Finn style raft that Paul built with his daughter as part of a school program. I mean, not a school program, but she was reading Huckleberry Finn, and so they decided to build a raft together. So now they're literally, that's crazy and wonderful. I mean, I agree that is camp because it's so absurd. It's just I really love when things are absurd, and the idea that now they're going to just go down the river in a Huck style raft is beautiful. And
It is absurd.
the
Well,
yeah.
it's absurd that this guy doesn't have another way, because she's the one who brings the Jeep. He doesn't have a vehicle, right?
Well,
Or is
no,
there?
actually, I
Yeah,
don't
he
think he
doesn't have a
does.
vehicle, huh?
Yeah, he does not have a vehicle. No.
Right, which is insane. Like, how would you not have a vehicle? I
Look.
mean, obviously he doesn't have phones, but that's not that. I mean, even cell phones don't work.
Kevin McCarthy
These days.
crashes the Jeep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's
Yes.
her. She brought that up.
Yeah.
He takes her Jeep. So they're like, well, without your Jeep, how are we going to get down there? So he doesn't seem to have a vehicle at all. Anyway, it's very strange.
Mountain man, he lives up in the hills. Like he doesn't.
Right. He doesn't need his own. Yeah. He's chosen to get by without uh, a car of his own. Look, I'm not knocking the choices here. I'm just saying that it gives us this wonderful result, which is that they're going to go down river on a raft. Two healthy people plus this wounded scientist, because he gets all beaten up and injured in the Jeep accident when he wrecks it. The first
So,
thing that
yeah,
come.
go ahead.
Yes, babe.
Oh, by the way, so he did get away, and he's going to warn the army, which I guess they forgot to keep the hotline that they had in Return of the Living Dead alive. So despite all that, but again, because she beat the crap out of him, is why he wrecks the Jeep. Basically, yet again, she's complicit in possibly hundreds of deaths, and but it's that guy's fault for taking the Jeep. Of course,
So
Right.
that's a really good point. Yeah, she's so plucky. She's such a plucky heroine that you never do think about the fact that you're right. She is causing a lot of the heartache here.
Well,
all of it.
I think of it
a lot.
But I mean, I do think that you shouldn't be expected to, like, I wouldn't expect that my pulling a lever was going to release, man-eating fish into the river. So I get that, but I do think that, yes.
Military installation.
Yeah.
And you're gonna press a lever.
Right. No, I know. No, you're
No,
right.
it's pretty dumb.
It was ill advised, especially after what she's seen. She's seen these weird creatures in the lab. So, yeah, I think she is complicit for sure, but I don't know. I mean,
if I were to retcon,
I guess the army is the most complicit because piranhas and Texas. Yeah.
Man, the military-industrial piranha complex, man. No, if I were to retcon, I would have said that the river had gotten diverted, or there had been some development. Where originally it wouldn't have gone directly into there. But
and I want to skip forward to
No, wait, before you do, Julia, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just don't want to miss this one opportunity really quickly, because this is the moment, and I completely nearly forgot. I'm nearly past it. But this is actually where Kevin McCarthy gives us the monologue. It's on the raft that he
Yeah.
explains why there are mutant piranha
Right. The
here,
whole thing
and
about
it's
North Korea. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and it's about
yeah.
well, it's about the North Vietnamese. But what's interesting to
The
me
North Korea.
is that this is where I think the movie in 1978, just 3 years after the end of the Vietnam War, has built into it a lot of that sort of Vietnam, post-Vietnam era cynicism
Mhm.
that I think seems out of time in other words, they remake this movie in 1995. And I have a feeling that a lot of this doesn't play the same way in 1995 because to some extent, the cynicism that comes from the notion that the army would do something so catastrophically stupid would be believable and really, really just horrible to somebody in the 70s. And I think by the 90s, you just sort of take it for granted that the army does colossally bad things, you know?
Well,
And
and it's worth noting in the 2010 remake they jettisoned the military angle completely in their prehistoric
really,
piranhas that are released by an earthquake or something. It's been a while since I've seen that. Yeah, they're not mutated piranhas at all. They're like Stone Age piranhas, and so like they just completely kick that to the curb.
right. This, that's why also I think that Paul is intended to be a Vietnam vet. I think, once again, as we've seen many, many times, B films are still obsessed with the Vietnam War in the 1970s, as well they should be, because it's on everybody's mind. And B films are usually the place where America sort of most nakedly expresses its anxieties, in ways that don't happen in your A films where everything has to be said, it has to be more subtle and stuff. In B films, it's like, yeah, Vietnam caused us to do crazy stuff like mutate piranhas and hell, we're so stupid we'd put them in swimming
Personally,
pools and stuff.
what
Yeah.
I would like to see in hindsight is the 1970s horror cinematic universe, so we can have Leatherface versus Texas Piranha.
Yes. Oh my
Who will
gosh,
eat
that's a
who?
okay, Julia.
Another one for Castle of Horror Productions.
Oh man, I'm down with this. But also, what's funny when you mention that, it makes me think that a lot of times, again, we talked about it before, about a lot of horror kind of being a mirror. This is at a time when there aren't any website, left and right wing, that you can think of, and you can get any number of conspiracies or information or anything that you want to find. So a lot of like B movies where people just kind of putting this stuff out there. I heard this movie and it was meant to provoke this kind of like, well, they say that in the movie, but again, my cousin's brother so and so knew that he lived close to a military base and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that kind of, when you're talking about that B movie attitude of this, these were those kind of, hey, I'm throwing this out there kind of stuff from a lot of script writers, whether they were doing it tongue in cheek or whether they're like, no, man, this is really what I'm proving. Like, you don't understand. This is the reality. I got to get this out there on film, but I don't have enough money, so I'm going to make this film.
Yeah. Yeah. I think actually, we could mock it in a way. You could say that it's kind of sad that somebody wants to make a statement about Vietnam, and the only way they can do it is to put it into a cheesy movie about about mutated piranha. Um, but also, it's kind of cool because it then means, there's all of this art out there that has this sort of secret code going on. You know what else that made me think of? Because by the way, in a minute they're going to bring in this special army, team that is here to deal strictly with mutated piranha and other things like that they've been building to deal with the now over Vietnam War.
By the way, they
Ed
seem
Wood in
completely
Plan 9
useless.
from Outer Space. Oh yeah. Well, no, but
They,
that's the way. That's and when I say the army's being stupid, I don't mean I personally, Jason, think the army's being stupid. I think there's a cynicism going on at this time that makes you feel as though the army's so powerful that they're capable of doing colossally stupid things. That's a trope that's going on. That's why it took until even Bill Murray eventually finds a way to resell the army as an acceptable thing to do, and that's not for another few years after this movie. But I was thinking about Plan 9 from Outer Space, and one of the things that people don't remember is there's a speech in Plan 9 from Outer Space where all of a sudden Ed Wood has the general stop and talk about how entire towns have been wiped out by aliens and the army always covers it up. And to my knowledge, that's the first time in a movie that there was this notion that the United States government would be so cynical as to simply lie to the public about the death of thousands of people. And this is just Ed Wood, just sort of bleeding all over the page and going, "Yeah, I think the government can't be trusted." But it didn't become sort of the knee-jerk position of film until what we're looking at here. So anyway, Julia, you wanted to jump to a point. So what was it you
Well,
wanted
what
to
I was
jump
going
to?
to say was, and this is actually, I mean, we're going to go back. I'm not trying to get us to the end of the movie, but I just wanted to make the note, kind of put a bookmark in for the end of the movie about how we're talking about how careless people are letting these razorfish be created. Also, what the hell is it that is at the point where all these fish are going to suddenly bottleneck into one spot and, oh, there's this magical pollution that we can release right there that will kill them all, and we're not worried about that killing all those kids in the camp water or anybody else that's drinking water from this area? Like, I just was like, what is this toxic pollution that's supposed to kill these mutant fish that could not be killed by actual poison that we're just going to
No, it's
release into
nonsense.
the water?
That's well,
The creature from the
we can
Black
talk
Lagoon.
about it if you want. That's complete nonsense. Yeah.
Anyway, but that was, like I said, we can get back to it later, but because we were talking about just the carelessness of breeding these creatures and then having them available there to be released to begin with, let alone having the stupid, woman show up and decide that she's going to pull levers at this weird military lab. So it's just another thing. But as far as the people that go around, the actual piranha, the actual carnage, I wanted to talk about that a little bit because I
Yeah.
find the idea of the piranha and, like I said, the effects to be terrifying. But when in actual fact, so many of the attacks are so ridiculous that it really takes me out of the horror part of it and into the sort of humor part of it. Because if you have these little bitty fish nibbling at you and you're holding on to a wall, pull yourself out of the water. And yeah, maybe some of the
Yes.
fish will come up with you, but you can pull them off and throw them in. There shouldn't be dragged down. It's not like a shark where the thing is strong and it pulls you down. I don't understand why they're getting dragged down. That's one thing if they've been, like, major arteries have been cut and so now they're just bleeding out and they don't have the strength. But I think a lot of times it really just seems silly when they have some of these fish nibbling at them. And clearly, I mean, we see from the main character, what's his name? You said the guy? Paul? No.
Paul. Yep.
Yeah, Paul. When Paul
Yep.
gets nibbled at by the fish and then gets pulled out of the water, he's not that badly hurt. So it's clear they don't do very quick. They're not like super fast at tearing people apart. It takes a while. And so that makes me think that a lot of the attacks just seem really silly because you're like, well, you totally could have gotten out of that. Like they really could have just gotten out of the water, or somebody could have just hit some fish off the person.
Well, it changes from scene to scene. Sometimes there seems to be so many, because I can imagine this. Each fish is only able to pull a little bit, right? A fish could only pull a little bit of weight. But if there were hundreds and hundreds of them dragging onto you, then sure they could move you in the same way that a whole bunch of
Right.
people can pick up a car, right? I can believe that, but there are moments in the movie when it seems unconvincing, when people are being attacked by the fish and the people don't seem to be very quickly moving in any sort of orderly fashion. And I can like marvel no prize it and say, well, it's because they're very confused and so they don't know what to do next and so they're standing still. I don't know, but there are points where you're like, okay, everybody needs to start moving in that direction right now because
Right.
there are razorfish attacking everyone.
I think to me, I mean, I'm not saying it's not kind of silly, but to me, I always saw it as a combination of factors. There's bunches of them, and according to piranha lore, they can strip a person clean or animal clean in blah 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 amount of time. That was always the
Yeah, I remember
thing
that.
with
Yeah,
piranha. And then also panic makes people crazy, especially large amounts of people panicking. And so
sure.
that always was that I think Julia's onto something. It is like you're like why don't you just crawl up? The one dude who does crawl up, though, the older guy from the beginning, I mean, he dies
Yeah,
because eaten enough of his, lower body
yeah.
that's a factor.
But that's only
He
because
actually gets
nobody was
out.
there to help him. But if some of these guys, like the people, at the camp and whatever, I feel like there would have been somebody who could have helped them pretty quickly, or at least they could have tried.
Maybe I thought. Well, also they're mutant piranha, so all bets are off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I
Yeah,
were
I
to,
mean,
if I come back as the writer, and you go, "Gee, Mr. Writer, why is that silly? Like they could have escaped." I'm like, "They're mutants. You don't even know what they can do.
Right.
yeah,
Crazy. Like
yeah.
we make those
Who
to eat people." So they know that's all they care about. So once you're attacked, that's it. And
maybe the piranha's bite has a mild sedative
Well,
effect that
and
causes people. Yeah, go ahead.
frankly, like animals in these kinds of movies never actually behave like how animals do. And like Jaws, that the shark in Jaws does not behave like a real shark.
Yeah,
Looking at this, this is a monster movie. It just happens that the monster is based on something that exists. But I mean, this movie even goes a step further than Jaws, and Jaws doesn't even give us the out that the shark is, mutated or anything. Like this movie at least gives us kind of an out that these are genetically engineered super piranha. So I don't
yeah.
know. I'm by the laws of monster movie. I think that all of the piranha carnage gets a pass. I will say this: the one thing I love about all these scenes, but the thing that I enjoyed a lot is that they have the asshole camp counselor guy that they've set up to be
Yeah.
the big asshole of the movie, and yet
Yeah.
when the piranhas start attacking, he's pulling kids. Like he doesn't do the typical douchebag thing, and like
Yeah.
they didn't make him a blubbering coward. Before he gets out of the water, he prioritizes pulling kids out of the water. And
Yes.
I
He
kind of
becomes a good
love
person.
that. Yeah, I
That was
kind of love
surprising.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of
It
movie
was
wouldn't
Paul
have done
Bartel.
that.
It
Yeah.
was this guy. He plays a douchebag in a lot of movies, and I was completely prepared to enjoy seeing him get eaten, and yet, yeah, he stops being a dick the moment the killer fish attack, and he becomes a person that we admire. And in fact, at the end, he seems to be really hurt that there are people that he's lost camp counselors and so forth. All that's super surprising. It was good stuff, and I was amazed by that. Yeah, Paul Bartel. He died in 2000. He was only 61 years old. So very very sad, really. Um, I knew him from Eating Raoul. He was also in Rock and Roll High School. Used to see him a lot. Uh, so yeah, the other basically they gave us a plot point that down the river past the dam is all the fish are on this side of the dam, and so we think for now that the dam is what's keeping the fish from the other part of the river. Down the river are two major targets. There's the camp where Paul's daughter is, and there's the new Ocarina Springs resort, which is having its grand opening. And Dick Miller, the beloved King of the Bees, Dick Miller, in a really groovy, Texas style leisure suit and a really fantastic wig, is here, and he's like the mayor. He's exactly the mayor character from Jaws, only like with a Texas accent and like +10
A
obnoxiousnous. And yeah,
barely passable Texas accent. That's being kind. That Texas accent goes in, and I love him. I love him. He will always be Mr. Futterman from Gremlins to me. Like
oh yeah.
I mean, he's in a lot of things, but that's my first exposure. And I like obviously that's not another Joe Dante movie, but he is not very convincing as a Texan, even with that admittedly awesome cowboy get up that he's got on.
I love him, man. Dick Miller is so great. He's also the guy in The Terror. Do you remember he played the manservant? And in The Terror, which was
And
supposed to
Bucket
take
of
place in
Blood
France.
too. And he's the
Oh yeah,
killer beatnik in Bucket of Blood, which is a great Roger Corman movie.
yeah. And he had that
So
that Bronx Jew accent. And yet, in the Terror, which is supposed to take place during the Napoleonic Wars in France, he kept the Bronx accent. But here, in a movie, here he's got the Texas accent. What are you gonna do? Um,
So this is what I was talking
yes.
about, though. This part is at the beginning when I said that, there's this dark thing to me, and that is, yes, the thing that from Jaws and the thing here, and the thing in so many horror movies and other kinds of movies, where the person who is looking at the bottom line for their big event, their opening, their grand opening, their whatever, or even just their company, will dismiss safety concerns for the public because it's going to affect the numbers and the publicity will look bad. And this is such to me that when I see this in films, I always feel so depressed and just hopeless, because I really feel like this is the truth of the world. I think that's the whole thing with Al Gore's, the inconvenient truth. It's that if there are profits to be made, then safety and environmentalism and other concerns be damned, because we just want the money and we don't really care. And that's why, the litigious society that we're in, it's like so many corporations will put out the unsafe car or the unsafe whatever and say, and we'll actually have a moment when they go, how much is it going to cost us in lawsuits if this thing that we know is bad causes deaths? And is that more or less than how much it would cost to recall all these things and fix them? And oftentimes they've made the decision to go ahead and let the lawsuits happen and the deaths happen because they don't want to lose the money. And that just makes me ill. And I told Jason that I was going to talk about this, and he's like, hey, just don't be too much of a downer. But it just really bothers me when I see it, because it's just so pervasive. So anyway, so that part depresses the hell out of me, even though it's just a throwaway line in this film where he's like, it's going to affect their grand opening. And then, of course, people end up dying at his grand opening. But it just made me so sad. I was like, God, I hate that this is what our culture is about. It's like, we got to make the money. It doesn't matter if people die. Anyway, that's the end of my rant.
No, I mean, well, but you're totally right, and that's sort of that message. Rich people are always going to look at their bottom line. They don't care who gets hurt. The army is willing to make crazy choices, and they don't care who they hurt. Those are two ideas that are completely at home in a B horror movie, and
Right.
yet would have been if you had been a straight guest, a congressman or something on 60 Minutes, and were to say the same thing, that you would be run out of town, that because you're not allowed to say something that's cynical. But you can put something that's cynical into a horror movie, and you can always have a wink to it. But yes, a lot of people do think that, and of course it's because there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah, the guys who made the Pinto really did decide there was a certain number of people dying in car fires that was acceptable, and because that was the amount that they could afford to pay out and no more, but that much was okay. Those decisions get made. That is a downer. Jesus. Anyway,
All right, resume talking about the more lighthearted parts of this.
The more lighthearted piranhas eat everybody.
Yes.
Talk about that. Oh man. See, that's the thing. The business guys are the real piranha, huh?
oh my
Who's the
God.
monster
Yeah.
now? Who's the monster now?
See, that's the way you could have really accomplished that. Imagine a scene with like a two-way mirror where the rich guy is looking through the mirror at the piranha, and we like really sell it that he's looking at a
Oh,
reflection.
see, that they
Yeah,
didn't do that in the remake, and
yeah.
now they should have.
I have a future, my friend. See? We're
Ah,
okay.
I'll be part of it.
Now into the plot suddenly comes because between two scenes, our heroes call the army, and in comes this special forces team made up of some random MPs, a line of jeeps, and Barbara Steele. Barbara Steele of like Italian horror fame. Antonio Margheriti, Tony, you mentioned, who made Killer Fish or whatever the heck the TV version of that was, like The Mystery of the Piranha or something like that.
Deadly treasure of the
Deadly
piranha.
Treasure of the Piranha. Anyway, that was made by Antonio Margheriti, who had worked with Barbara Steele. Oddly enough, it's a very small world. Barbara Steele, this woman here, this I don't even know what you call this princess of horror films. Anyway, she's here as this extremely tall government scientist who knows all about Project Razorfish, and I guess was the lover of Kevin McCarthy, and she's going to work to hide the crimes that he's committed, also to get it all under control. Her motivations are a little vague, but I mean, it's basically just for us to understand because this is a B film. She is just the evil army scientist. She's just basically out to cover her own ass and cover the ass of the military, and I guess if she can manage it to keep as few people from getting killed as possible. But that's like a distant third or fourth after all those other concerns, like protecting the program and all that. Um, and she's not unknown because the press is actually asking her questions about, like, oh, ma'am, what do you think about the razorfish and so forth? And she's there to assuage the fears of the public. So, anyway, these special forces guys, one of the first things they do is arrest Paul and the skip tracer. And then we enter into pure Looney Tunes. This is true camp. I mean, Drew, can you explain to us exactly how it is that they break out of? They're actually very quickly. They're in jail at one point, and they're also captives of the army at one point.
The way that they escape from the army is that she flashes the army guard so Mountain Man can plug them in the face. But the breasts are not actually the actresses; they are actually the breasts of a Holiday Inn diner waitress that they hired because the actress herself would not show her boobs, therefore not boobs.
This is so
And it was
appalling.
totally unnecessary and gratuitous and stupid for her to even have done that, the character, because she already had distracted the guy by pointing a look over there thing.
Julia, this is a gratuitous movie. This movie is nothing but not gratuitous. Complaining about this movie being gratuitous is kind of like complaining about it being hot if you live in Texas.
Yeah, it is dumb though. It's truly this
it's
is
totally
where
dumb. It's totally dumb. No argument.
I think they're doing it in fact to get their rating. In other words, probably without the boobs here, this movie would not have gotten. Now that means that when you watch it on HBO, it would say this has nudity, which is going to mean
nudity
something.
at the beginning.
This would have gotten an R rating on gore alone.
Yeah, because the skinny dipping girl is naked, and then there's all the blood. They would have gotten the rating.
But it's the skinny dipping girl is more important. Again, when you're going through the TV guide in 1979, and it says in parentheses R-rated, and then it says language L, violence V, and then it'll say N for nudity. That N is super important in deciding whether or not you're going to stay.
That's how you get the 13-year-old boy.
Exactly. Because you're watching for the LVN,
or the
and which does not in this case stand for licensed vocational nurse, but language, violence, and nudity.
Anyway, they had it already with the skinny dipping girl from the beginning.
The golden thing though was to see adult situations. You saw that, and you knew that you could possibly watch cable at a point where the adults weren't around.
Right.
You truly knew at that point that movie was going to be great.
Right.
For all the reasons that you would want to watch that, and get away with it.
What would you qualify Fighting Mutant Piranha as? Because I think that's an adult situation.
Yeah,
You're
but
right.
it wasn't the one that
not
the
of the
ratings
kind
board was going to put in the HBO guide.
Exactly. This was a term of art. That you rarely saw that there was sometimes the warning strong sexual content, but let me say that was so rare as to be vanishingly unlikely to come across. What you would see was adult nudity and adult situations. Nudity and adult situations together would mean it was going to be the right kind of nudity, basically. Without it, you might be talking about, God knows what you could be talking about. It could just be, movies where people wound up naked for no reason. Like this, by the way. This movie has a love scene that doesn't even happen on screen, by the way. Because Heather Menzies and not Paul, but our main character, Paul. Anyway, the character Paul, they have a love scene, and we just basically cut away from it, and they're still wearing the same clothes when it is over with. So, okay. So anyway, now we've got the special forces, and we moved rapidly towards Act 3, which is that they need to get down to save the people at the summer camp, and then save the people at the grand opening of the Aqua Arena, which again is just a big resort that is on the water in Central Texas. The summer camp part, that's where Paul's daughter is. And that's the scene, Drew, that you were mentioning, because there, we've had a whole lot of drama around the fact that this little girl does not want to go swimming because she's afraid of the water. And it turns out, of course, that she's completely right. She intuits, maybe absurdly, but she intuits that there's some kind of monster in the water. And in fact, in this case, there absolutely is. And this is really a horrific scene because all these like middle schoolers are getting eaten by razorfish.
Not really middle schoolers; they're little bitty kids. Only the counselors are a little older, but the kids are elementary school kids. No, it's
Yeah, I guess
terrifying.
that's true.
That part's awful.
Yeah, it is. It's really, and it's gutsy. This is actually one of the gutsiest things in the whole movie is the fact that these fish are eating kids. It's astonishing.
This is back
Um,
from the 70s, and you can still do that.
well, Tony and I used to talk a lot about the fact that, like in Haute Tension, right? I walked out of that movie because I was really appalled at the kid getting shot with a shotgun, and I was hurt by it and insulted by it and blah blah blah. So it was my personal choice. I walked out of the movie. Here I would never do that. And I don't know if it's because this is so goofy that I don't feel the same way about it. I don't know. But this did not I did not feel about all of these young kids being eaten by these fish. So who knows? Maybe I'm just a
Maybe it's
much dark.
because it's an animal and not human malice, perchance.
Yeah, I guess so. That's possible. That's totally possible. There's also the fact that I guess I have to give in to the fact that there's campiness to this movie, and there's definitely no campiness to Attention. That's
Although, and yet that this scene is probably the most horrific scene in the movie. Like it's
yeah.
terrible. It's
Yeah.
nightmare inducing. I mean, I had nightmares after watching this movie because of the scene, and I know my wife did as well.
Yeah. It's pretty dark. You mean recently? You mean that she still was disturbed by it after watching it like in the last couple of weeks? That's
Well,
amazing.
we watched it the other night, and we had both had nightmares that night, and yeah, it's. I mean, I'm man enough to admit when a movie is unnerving to me. I think
I'll be
that
darned.
I think that's okay. I mean, the problem.
Oh, it is okay. No,
One of the things
it's
about watching horror films is you get jaded. So
yeah.
I get impressed when a movie actually has something in it that can kind of get to me. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that this is like the most terrifying thing I've ever seen, but it's disturbing.
No, I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. And I wouldn't mock that at all. No. I think I think that makes complete sense. By the way, Heather Menzies here. Did you know? Because I did not know this, but Julia, you've seen Sound of Music plenty of times. This is Louisa.
Anyway, is
Yeah,
it who?
Louisa.
Who?
Louisa Von Trapp.
Louisa?
Little Louisa. Yes.
Really? Aw, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Um,
I did not know that. Yep.
yeah, Louisa's the one
Yeah.
who's
So little
turning
Louisa.
7 on Tuesday and wants a pink parasol.
Ah. I I think that's right. I actually can't remember the difference between the Von Trapps. So your guess is as good as mine, honestly. She was the one who wore the little hat, anyway. But yes. Okay. So after they manage to get to the summer camp, and Paul Bartel is shown to be a hero, a dick most of the time, but a hero under fire. Good for him. Now it is time to very quickly get to the place of the grand opening of the Arena, where all kinds of activities are happening. Kids are swimming, you know, young people are scuba diving, and they're water skiing, all kinds of stuff. And so, this is where the fish are going to attack, and nobody's listening because Dick Miller, the ostensible mayor of Ocarina Springs, is not listening, and he's even lying to the press. The press calls, "Is there any truth to the rumors of razorfish in the water?" And he's like, no, that's not true. Until it becomes abundantly clear that it is true, because
Oh, hey, Jason.
You're going.
I'm sorry.
Razorfish in the water. What's next? People falling into quicksand? Of course, that doesn't happen. Come on, people.
Oh, I have to go back and correct myself because I checked, and Louisa is not the little one. She's the blonde, the older one. That's the trickster, and she doesn't. She's the one who likes to mess with the governesses and give them jars of spiders. So I stand corrected.
We've watched that one so many times, and Tony, I know that your spouse is gaga over musicals as well, so I assume, I assume you've seen that one a lot. Yeah. Okay, so go ahead.
I like a lot of musicals. That one's not one of my favorites. That's okay.
This is not one of the ones in rotation. Okay, all right.
Not for me. I mean, maybe fine.
What happens next is Paul decides, look, the only way that we're going to put a stop to this is if I go even farther downstream between this part of the river and any larger body of water, and I go open up these valves at this water treatment plant and release a whole bunch of toxic waste into the river, which should hopefully kill these mutant razorfish. And everybody thinks that that's actually a swell idea, and so he goes down, and now you have some of the tension of the film where like real tension. It's as stupid an idea as that is, in the logic of the film, that's going to work, so we're fine. That's what's going to work. He has to open some valves to poison the fish, but of course it means he has to swim underwater and hold his breath and open this valve, at an underwater treatment, at a flooded treatment facility, because this is the first summer I've ever seen in my life in Texas where there is no drought. And he's under all this water, and he opens the valve, and fish are eating on him, and all this stuff is happening. That's a scary scene. It's actually a really, it's a good scene.
Jason, I feel like I would be regretful if I didn't point out to you. Actually, there's been a lot of flooding in the very area that this is supposed to be.
No, I said the same thing to Jason. I was like, no, it's like every other time. It's drought and then flood, drought and then flood. But I couldn't believe how long he was underwater. It was very. Jason pointed out that it was very mission impossible.
This should go for the Olympics.
Huh?
Yes.
Olympics?
You should go off for the Olympics.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. It was Rico Browning style. It was like he's, and this actor is really underwater. That's the great thing, is you're watching, the actor playing Paul, Bradford Dillman. He's really holding his breath underwater, hassling with this iron valve as he turns it, and toy fish start chewing on him.
Slicing, going through those windows and breaking, just going, I don't know how he wasn't completely bloody, because he puts his hand on this broken shards of glass, and then he goes through the broken shard, the glass, breaks the glass with his face and his body later on, and I'm just like, how is he not getting? I mean, he gets cut up by the piranha, but not by the glass for some reason.
Yep. So he's actually tied there, and he's dragged out of the building by Heather Menzies when she waits a certain number of minutes. I think he says wait 100 seconds, and then
count to 100,
and then pull me out. Yeah, and then pull me out, because I need to have it done by then, or I guess I'll get eaten by fish, or I'll have drowned, or who knows what. That's all super exciting, and that's basically the end, because all the people who were getting eaten back at the resort have gotten out of the water. It's it's like a Civil War movie there, because they're all laid out all over the yard.
They imply that the piranha have gotten out the sea, even though
yes,
we're in Central Texas and the coast is way away.
So let's think about that for a second. In fact, they're in San Marcos. For the sake of argument, they're around Austin, right? They're in San Marcos, and they're gonna get either to the ship channel and get out that way, or, as Joya pointed out, they could get out to Corpus Christi. But either way, they've got a hell of a lot of swimming to do.
Colorado leads to the Gulf, because it does that at Matagorda, which is where I used to go all the time. Not to
it's possible. It's possible, but let's also think for a second. Let's say they do get out to the sea. Let's say they do get out to the coast. There are fish that are, when you really think about it, fundamentally more dangerous than these things would be in the actual ocean. I mean, we have sharks. Yeah, you're right.
The idea
Are
here
they
was that they
mutants?
multiply ridiculously fast. So it was like there were going to be like millions of them.
Yeah.
Oh, Joe Dante, you and your multiplying monster.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And Barbara Steele reassures us, and we know because of the cynicism of the film that whatever Barbara Steele reassures us of cannot be true. And so she's saying, well, they must all be dead, and so we know that they must be alive. Um,
Creepy.
and that's great stuff. What I want to ask you guys as you segue into your final thoughts. Why does this work as a summer film? I mean, what about summer? We're trying to put together this motif of summer movies, right? And we did all the creature movies. This year we did some really strange stuff like Blood Beach last year. What is it about summer movies that this is a part of? Because it definitely is. What does it make you think of along those lines? And also your final thoughts about Piranha. Joya, I think we started with you.
So you're saying, what does this movie make me think of that has to do with the summer?
Well,
Is that
no, I
what your
mean,
question is?
how does this movie fit into our idea of a summer retrospective? I mean, like what does it
Well,
say
I think
something along
any film that involves people going to the beach or going to summer camp and being in the water and swimming and having fun, it's always about the idea that you have dropped your defenses, you've dropped your walls, you're relaxing. This is when you're supposed to be able to just enjoy yourself, and this is when you're most vulnerable. And you're vulnerable because you're in the water, you can't see what's underneath the water, and you're in a swimsuit, so most of your skin is bare. So yeah, it's just that. I think that's what ties all of these together is that vulnerability of being outside and having so much of your skin exposed and having creatures be around and not being able to see in the water. So I mean, I think it perfectly ties in with that. And it does a good job of it. I mean, we can criticize some of the silliness of it, but the fact is, this was a really cheap movie to make, and they did a really good job with it. The dollars went far. The problems with this film, not even the acting. Like I think we said, I can't remember if it was last week or maybe another movie I was watching, but something recently where we were talking about the acting was just so bad. And this one, the acting is not bad. I mean, they're not going to win any Oscars, but the acting's not bad. The effects are pretty decent. It's only, some of the ideas are cheesy, but I think that's probably true in real life too, where you'd have some things where you just be like, that's just ridiculous. I can't believe, heck, especially, given certain
Yeah.
political climates that we have going on now. It's like there's so many things where you go, I just can't believe that's reality. I can't believe that that's actually what's happened in this situation. So, I think they did okay given what they had to work with.
Excellent. Excellent. So it was Tony, what about you?
I mean, I think it's a summer movie because it's summer camp, like straight up.
Yeah.
Looks like summer in Texas. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a summer vacation movie for, an unfortunate one for all the kids. That's for sure.
Yes.
But yeah, I still, this is definitely a B horror movie, but I really, it's pretty brutal in a lot of ways that I hadn't remembered. Definitely led to the whole thing of the times with piranhas will get you regardless, because look, why isn't that plausible when you're young that mutant piranhas, you don't know what's in the water.
Right.
And I think there's like a lot of great bits in it. I think it's it's a solid creature feature, and definitely fits firmly in the let's do a summer movie retrospective of horror.
Very cool. Drew, what are your final thoughts?
Well, I mean, you talk about it, the summerness of this, as Tony kind of hit upon. If you grew up in Texas, this whole vibe of being on the river, being on the lake, that kind of thing is very this captures that pretty well, especially considering that the screenwriters and the director, none of them are actually from Texas, but they do capture the feel of that very well.
Yeah.
They have some fun with the local geography. Like, I'm not sure that this all syncs up exactly the way it does in real life, but who cares?
Yeah.
This is a fun monster movie. Like I said, this is kind of a good, lazy, you don't have to think it's about mutant piranha. It is exactly what it should be. And I think that's the reason why we are still talking about this nearly 40-year-old B movie.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable. And I'm glad that we revisit it, and I also want to point out, had one heck of a VHS cover back when VHS's videotapes were in those big puffy VHS things. There was a girl in a bikini with several giant piranha under it. So
Absolutely.
visually mystifying to someone growing up in the 1980s when you pass that. So great concept. Enjoyed talking about it.
Although the Piranha 2 has a better cover in many ways because it's just totally insane. Because there are flying piranha chasing people, and that was always amazing.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but yes, when I look at the cover right now, it's all these people running down the beach with piranha with winged gills, basically, or gill wings, or whatever. That's
So ridiculous.
that's
Yeah, we
that's
love
some
it.
crazy stuff. I love it. Okay, my feeling about this is that I'm so happy that we watched this movie, mainly because if we're gonna do a B movie, this is the way to do it. Have a sense of humor, but but don't go all the way into comedy. Don't have stupid sound effects. Don't play like Tweety Bird songs when people get hit on the head. This is a dumb movie presented quite proudly, and I really do admire that. It's a giant campfire tale, and so that's good stuff. Yeah, and I really loved seeing my state presented so well. I mean, they come across really well. Drew, thanks. You're totally right about the point that in fact in my youth there used to be a lot of flooding around there. Central Texas, I always think of as being super hot, but you're totally right that there's plenty of flooding that goes on, and they're lucky. They're filming at a point when there's some heavy duty flooding going on. Yeah. So I can't remember what we are doing next. I believe that next week we are coming back for Jaws 3. And although I'm tempted to do more Piranha films,
I kind
so
of,
maybe we'll leave that up to the.
would
Yeah.
like to
What's your thought,
do.
Tony?
I kind of want to do two because it's crazy, but
Well, we could do
also it's
that.
also
We,
kind of crazy.
Let's put that up to
I
a
think,
vote on Facebook.
yeah, that's what we should do.
yeah, I think we
Piranha
could.
2 versus
And
Jaws
bear in mind, we could
3D.
do both of them. Yeah, Piranha 2 or Jaws 3D, and really it's just a matter of do we skip straight to Jaws 3D or do we do Piranha 2 first? I'm totally interested in what the listeners will have to say. What about endorsements? What do you guys got going on? Joya, you went first. What's going on?
Well, we went and saw Dunkirk in the movie theater, and that was a well done film. I found it super depressing, but only because it's real, and there's nothing
Yeah.
can't not be depressed about war movie. I felt like it was a really good film for people to watch who are in the position of making decisions about war, because I think it's really easy to go, oh, it's just people and money, and not really think about what it means when you're sending people to die in these horrible situations. And I don't know, it was really dark. So, but I think it's an important film, and I'm glad that they made it, and I recommend it.
Very good. Yes. Tony, what about you?
Well, I'm still waiting to see Dunkirk because the Draft House here in town is showing it in 70 millimeter. I've heard is the way to see it if you can. Although everybody's saying 70 millimeter IMAX is the actual way to see it. But also there's some really cool dovetailing into that. There's some really cool analysis online of how the soundtrack was made, and
Really?
I recommend checking that out as a musician and a like composition sound design nerd. You can look it up. There's some really interesting things they did to evoke what they wanted to evoke in the soundtrack. It's really, really cool. But as far as straight up endorsements, I'm going to endorse another Kung Fu movie, which I rewatched. Max, who's been on the show, his wife usually has Kung Fu themed birthday parties. And this year was Pai Mei, who is most famous for, being put into Kill Bill, but has been a character that basically a friend of mine put it best, the Darth Vader of the Kung Fu world, where he brought about the downfall of the Shaolin monks. And so Pai Mei, white eyebrows, often called Abbot White, is we had that was the theme for the birthday, so there was a bunch of Pai Mei movies. My favorite, I think, is one called Shaolin Executioners, or Executioner from Shaolin.
Mm-hmm.
If you can see its subtitles, it's got a pretty cheesy dub that's also not kind of edited, but I think it's on Amazon Prime. You can also look for the real subtitled version, not the kind of weird bootlegs. But Pai Mei in this is really interesting because his pressure point where you can kill him moves around. It also ties into the melding of martial arts like styles. So the woman who supposedly brought about the Wing Chun style, or the crane style, kind of in this, they bring that about, and then combining it with this tiger style that was a real forceful style. There's this whole thing, but it's one of my favorites. It's been a favorite for a long time, so I would go with Executioner from Shaolin, or Shaolin Executioner. Also on Amazon, there's one I haven't watched all of, but it starts out really great, called Swordsman and Enchantress, and it's super fun and crazy, which I really like about older Shaw Brothers martial arts movies. So that's my endorsements this week.
Love it. Drew, what do you have?
Yeah, I have been crazy busy, so I haven't really gotten into much of anything. So I'm just going to kind of repeat my endorsement of The Flash from last week, because I am further along into the season that they just put up on Netflix. And I was pleasantly surprised they introduced Kid Flash this season. And one of my concerns always when they do sidekick characters in live action is they always seem to make the choice of casting somebody that is too close to the age of the guy playing the elder hero. And in this case, you have an actor who's in his early to mid-20s playing a teenager, versus the guy playing Barry Allen, who is only in his late 20s. So. But I was pleasantly surprised. They really do kind of nail the Barry Allen, Wally West dynamic extremely well. And in fact, better than most of the interpretations of Batman and, if we were going to compare it to another superhero duo, better than most of the interpretations of Batman and Robin that we've seen in live action. Like they really do a really good job of it, and I've just found that to be one of the most enjoyable things about the show. And of course, The Flash is gleefully dorky, so that's just something that I like, the fact that it is unapologetically, stupidly dorky. It does it. I say that with the best of the most admiration behind it, because so much, anytime something's like adapting a comic book, like the first thing that they always try to do is kind of drag these very vibrant characters kicking and screaming into our world. This show doesn't really worry about that. They're going to have ridiculous costumes and characters with ridiculous names and pseudoscience and alternate realities and time travel and all the and cold guns and all these crazy things. And either you're on the boat or you're not. And I love how unapologetic it is. Like about the only thing I can give a thumbs down on the episodes that I've watched is the musical episode, which was garbage.
What?
Unfortunately, it was garbage, and they should call Josh Whedon and apologize for ripping off his concept and not doing it justice. But
No.
Big thumbs up, except for that one episode.
No, I disagree wholeheartedly. I don't even watch that show, but we watch the musical episode because we like musical episodes of things. And plus, it's not just Buffy. Lots of shows have done musical episodes. And I loved it because the singers are so great. I loved the piece with Victor Gerber and Jesse L. Martin, where there's
those guys can sing.
Captain Jack Stardust.
But it was lazy. That it was 90% covers and there was very little dancing.
Yeah. No, it was a jukebox musical. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thumbs down. Thumbs down. I was excited about it, but thumbs down. Sorry.
Okay.
Everything else, thumbs up. In fact, the Abracadabra episode that they did, that I just watched literally this afternoon, that thing's awesome. That's like one of the best. It's only 45 minutes. It's one of the best live action superhero things I've ever seen. So, thumbs up for everything else, thumbs down for the musical episode.
Fabulous. Okay.
Hate on me if you want on Facebook.
No. Well, I mean, yeah, if people want to share their
Shout out to Vulcan Video. Shout
I
out to
do wanna
Vulcan
talk
Video.
about
That's
Vulcan
the other
Video.
thing. Yeah, Vulcan
Let's talk about
Video.
that.
Some of the people.
Yeah.
So I frequently rent the movie. In fact, I rented this very movie from Vulcan Video South specifically, but they have 2 locations in Austin. One of the great last standing video stores in.
Great. I miss that place.
Yeah,
I
have
love
everything.
Can I
love
tell a
Vulcan
story
Video. I
about
remember
Vulcan
we used to
Video?
go there. We used to go there all the time back when I was in college, even, and then with Jason when we got married. And I remember that my friend Ann and I we're looking for a movie to watch, and we decided it was time for us to watch a horror movie that we'd never seen before. So we started looking at them all because I was not into horror movies at the time, of course. I wouldn't say I'm into them now, actually, but anyway, we were looking at it and we were like, "Have you seen this? Have you seen this?" And neither one of us had seen The Exorcist at that point. So we decided to rent The Exorcist from Vulcan and go watch it. I think I probably told the story when we covered The Exorcist, but we were watching it in my apartment, and her boyfriend was working, but he kept calling to check in where we were in the movie and psyching us out about how that was not nearly as bad as it was going to get, and how that wasn't as bad as it was going to get. And then even when it was the worst part, in my opinion, where her head's spinning around and the part that everybody knows, he's like, "Nope, that's not the worst." We were like, "Shut up, you horrible person." Anyway, but I always think of Vulcan Video when I think about The Exorcist.
Well, several of the people at Vulcan Video actually listen to the show, and when I go in there to rent movies, they often engage me about the episode. And in fact, one of the clerks last week, very resoundingly, just resolute that the negativity spewed towards The Creature Walks Among Us was absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
That it smokes Revenge of the Creature, because this is more or less a direct quote. It smokes Revenge of the Creature because that movie is basically just the same old thing as the first one, and The Creature Walks Among Us is dark and interesting and exciting. And he made some valid points.
That is a valid point. No, that's no doubt about it. That's a valid point.
Jason,
what's that?
We had an excellent conversation. Drew had an excellent conversation, and there was no tying up of anybody. There was a meaningful transaction.
Well, we don't actually know what the Vulcan Video guys do in their spare time.
Yes,
they may be tying people up.
However, Drew did not elicit this by any coercion that we know of. So goes for everything, as far as we know, being above board.
All right, I want to talk really quickly though about Vulcan Video, because to me these guys, I'm sorry to spend so much time on this, but it was, you mentioned Vulcan and it made me flashback. Okay, when we came to Austin from Washington D.C., and so now I'm talking about, I believe it was May of 1996. So I'm talking about 21 years ago. We get to Austin, and you're always full of these worries about, have I made the right choice? Am I anyway, all of this time I'd been looking for Black Sunday, the movie by Mario Bava, and I checked like rental and in Manhattan, and all it could ever come up with was they'd go away and you mean the Blimp movie about the guys trying to blow up the Super Bowl? So and I go into Vulcan like our first weekend there, and we're subleasing some apartment, and go to Vulcan, the old one next to Conan's Pizza, and I say, "Do you guys have Black Sunday?" And and the guy stops, and I go, "And not the Blimp movie?" And he goes, "No, no, no." He goes, "But do you want the dubbed version or do you want the subtitled version?" And I was like, "This is my home." It was like, this is my place. Do you have any rooms to rent? It's Vulcan Video was the place out of the whole country that I was able to find Black Sunday by Mario Bava, and that was the beginning of a really long and wonderful thing, and that's 21 years ago. So I'm really glad to hear those guys are still kicking.
Sorry, Jason. I always say, if you can't find it at Vulcan or I Love Video, pretty much it probably doesn't exist in physical media. You might be able to find it online, but when there wasn't a YouTube, etc.
Yeah.
Like Vulcan, because Rain worked next door at Alpha Music at the time, so I was constantly in there.
Yeah.
And their clerk selections were amazing. And if you didn't see it there, you would go just a little, a short drive away, go to I Love Video, which is also amazing and one of the
Yeah.
largest rental places still in existence. And yeah, if you don't find it either of those places, it pretty much doesn't exist in physical media. And
Well,
it's
now we're
amazing.
living in a really weird time too, Tony, where these video stores have all gone away with a few exceptions. I mean, like I live in Denver. It's a big town, and there are no video stores here anymore. I mean, Video One did
Although
exist, and
apparently you have a Blockbuster Video.
Oh yeah,
if
the
if
last
if we've
remaining that Twitter account is awesome.
if there's a Blockbuster around, then I'd love to get to it. Okay, that sounds good.
It's
But my
famous. It's famous on Twitter.
okay.
Yeah, you should
Awesome.
look
I'll
that
Uh,
have
up.
to check it out.
That doesn't completely surprise me because Blockbuster Video belongs to Dish Network, which is headquartered here in Denver. But there's some likelihood that would happen. But like Video One was the place where if you wanted to get a copy of Piranha from 1978, Blockbuster was not likely to have that, but Video One was, and they finally closed. LA still has a few places, but the fact literally less video stores than there are drive-in movie theaters in this country, that's pretty amazing. And however, streaming is not rock solid perfect because not only does it require, an internet connection, but a lot of stuff is not available on streaming. So the best you can hope for is that somewhere, somebody along the way has like, I don't know, bootlegged it or any number of other things because you can't always, and I should know because if I'm looking for a particular movie, like like Piranha or like anything else, some random film from the 1970s, like Without Warning, okay, with Jack Palance and if it's not on your main cable, you can look on Amazon, you can look on Netflix. If it's not there, you can search on your Roku, and it'll search about 50 other services. But there's a really good chance that you're not going to find it, and that's kind of awful. That there are all these movies that are just missing, and we have no idea when they're going to come back. And Drew, you were saying that's why you prefer the hard versions. Anyway,
Well, I never have to worry about my copy of, I don't know, the Frank Langella Dracula disappearing on me because I
right.
got it. So
Yeah.
like there's something nice about that.
No, I mean you're not wrong, and I think it's possible that 20 years from now this will be very different somehow. Everything will be available somehow or other. That there are various ways we could see licensing change so that it makes it easier. But right now we're living in this really weird space where the video stores are gone and the streaming services are not keeping up. But uh, that's I don't know. I think we're living in a flashpoint. We're living in a snapshot. Okay, I got one more endorsement of my own, and it's a new podcast called 36 Questions, which is not a horror podcast. It is a musical. It is a Broadway musical for the earbud. It is the strangest. It is very odd. It's the first musical podcast I've ever heard. Basically, it's a straight up story told in 3 acts, 3 episodes, one a week, each one about 45 minutes or an hour, about this married couple who are on the verge of divorce because it turns out that the wife had told her husband a whole lot of lies about what her name was and where she was from, and when he found out, he ran away. And that's what the drama is about, except for that they're always breaking into song because it's a musical. This is really wild. It's really cool. Joy and I listened to the first 2 episodes, so you should check this out. And that's going on. That's going on right now. In fact, as we're recording this on the 6th of August, 2017, the third episode hasn't even gone up yet. So that's called 36 Questions, and I totally recommend it. The star, by the way, is Jonathan Groff. He's a Broadway star who's also known for playing Jesse James, so-called, on Glee. Anyway, and that is our episode for the week. As Tony mentioned, I will not urge you to commit any acts of violence. I will urge you merely to beg, cajole, plead and even perhaps bribe your friends to listen to the show, to enjoy the show, and then come onto the Facebook page and tell us what you think. Oh, and leave reviews on iTunes. I'm serious. Leave a review on iTunes. Leave a review on iTunes. It'll help people find the show. Thank you very much, everybody. We had a wonderful week discussing Piranha, and we can't wait to get on to the next one. Have a good night, y'all.
Good
Good
night.
night.